Autumn of 1880-4. Dry wind combed through the shortgrass prairie outside Trinidad, Colorado, where the land cracked like old hands left too long in the sun. Dust moved with a will of its own, curling up from wagon tracks long gone, whispering of those who deep passed through and vanished. The sky was wide enough to swallow a woman whole. Ruth Parker walked with her 2 children railing behind her. Her boots were scuffed through to the stocking. Her youngest, Samuel, only 6, dragged his feet until the dust stuck to his lashes. The girl, 15, named June, walked just far enough behind her mother not to touch, not to speak. The boy whimpered once, and Ruth stopped. Her back did not straighten. She just turned her head halfway and said, "You hush now." It was harsh, but it carried. She had buried her husband 5 days earlier. Not in a churchyard, not near anything but rock and sky and soil so dry it split like bone. He died coughing up blood that didn't stop. No one came to help, and when she sent June to the next ranch over, the girl returned 3 days later empty-handed, lips cracked, eyes too old. No one would take them in. He was not a man folks liked much. Ruth had known that once. Now she carried his old rifle over her shoulder, unloaded, and a sack of dried beans she stole from a homestead left open. Hunger scratched at her ribs like something alive. Her hands, wrapped in strips of her husband's shirt, trembled under the weight of the bag. They had no destination but west, away from the house where he died in a stench of sickness that lingered even after the body was gone. Ruth hadn't cried. June had, silent and still. Samuel didn't understand. He asked when Pa would wake up, and Ruth just told him to keep walking. Every few miles they defined a tree thin enough to sit under. Ruth would let the children rest while she watched the horizon. She didn't trust the quiet. Coyotes howled in the morning and again near dusk. One had followed them for a half day, its shape flickering along the edges of vision. She saw it once. Yellow eyes like tarnished brass. The wind never stopped. It blew grit into their mouths and under their clothes. It burned their skin raw, but they kept walking because the only thing behind them was death and the lawless edge of land to empty for grace. Ruth felt something unspool in her chest as they crested another low ridge and saw nothing but more of the same dust and sky and a thin trail that may have once been a road, or may have just been a place others gave up. Samuel sat down without asking. June didn't bother to scold him. Ruth stayed standing, eyes on the horizon, watching the way the air shimmered near the far line of land. Her lips cracked when she opened them. "We'll walk till sundown, Ma," June said, quiet. "There ain't nothing out here." "There's something," Ruth said. "There has to be." The girl nodded but didn't believe her. The boy just curled against a rock and closed his eyes. Ruth looked down at them. Her children. Their shoes worn down to skin. Their bones sharp under too little flesh. Her arms ached, her feet bled. But she stood there watching the land. The sun had started to bleed into the ground. She did not cry. She never did. They reached an abandoned line shack by dusk. It leaned sideways like it'd given up on itself, half-minus swallowed by cottonwoods and brush. The roof was split. The door hung wrong, but it stood. That was enough. Ruth knocked anyway. Habit, maybe, or respect. No answer came but the clear hour of insects and the moan of dry wood shifting in wind. She pushed the door open and let her eyes adjust. The floor was dirt. A rusted stove crouched in the corner like something mean undead. A cot sagged in the back, missing one leg draped with burlap. It smelled of mildew and age, but it would hold them through the night. "Inside," she said. Samuel obeyed. June hesitated, staring at the cot like it might bite. Ruth didn't speak again. She just set the sack down and unwrapped her hands. A cloth peeled away, stuck to half-minus healed blisters and old blood. She flexed her fingers and winced. There was no firewood. She searched behind the shack and found nothing but sticks and dry grass. Still, she gathered what she could, arms full, careful not to trip over the roots that snaked just beneath the surface. The sun was almost gone by the time she lit the first flame. The shack glowed gold in patches. Shadows danced across the slanted walls. Samuel leaned against his sister, eyes fluttering. June stared at the floor. Ruth portioned out a few beans into an old tin pot she found in the shack's corner, filled it with water from the canteen, and set it over the fire. The smell of beans made Samuel smile in his sleep. She should have felt something. Relief, grief. But inside Ruth was hollowed minus at wood. Something that had been carved clean by wind and time and loss. He hadn't been a good man, her husband, but he was the father of her children. And he had held her once, years ago, when she was young, unfrightened, and still soft. Back before the war changed him, before the debts, before the drinking, before he raised his voice, then his hand. She had stayed, because she thought she had to, because there was nowhere else to go, because he never beat the children, only her. She had told herself it was love, once. Outside, coyotes howled again, but further off. Ruth stirred the beans with a bent spoon. They were mush now, just enough to share. She handed the pot to June, who fed Samuel first, gentle as a nurse, then passed it back. They didn't speak. Ruth took the last few bites, her stomach clenched around it, hungry for more. But there wasn't any. You sleep, she said. He'll take first watch. June didn't argue. Later, when the shack had gone quiet and the fire was nothing but red breath, Ruth sat with the rifle across her lap, the door open, cold air cutting through the crack. The stars were thick tonight, the kind of sky that made you think maybe God was still watching, even if he never said a word. She thought of her mother, of Tennessee hills, of singing on Sundays when her voice was still clear and the world felt large in a good way. She hadn't thought of home in years. Not really. She wanted to cry, just once, but her eyes stayed dry, just wind and dust and silence. She breathed in slow, and didn't let it break her. The dust hadn't settled yet, subscribed. The next morning came quiet. Pale gray light seeped into the shack through a crack in the roof, catching dust in the air like tiny spirits rising. Ruth hadn't slept. Her neck ached from leaning against the wall. Her hands curled tight around the rifle all night, though nothing had come. Samuel coughed once, a dry buck. June stirred beside him, hair tangled, eyes already sharp. She looked older every morning. Ruth felt something catch in her throat and pushed it down. They set out again before full sun. There were no signs of people, no smoke, no hoof prints, no sound but the endless hush of prairie. Even the birds had grown quiet. Midday brought heat. The air shimmered. Samuel slowed until Ruth had to carry him on her back. She wrapped him with her coat, though the sweat soaked through both of them. His arms dangled limp. He hadn't eaten enough. None of them had. "Ma," June said from behind her, "there's something up ahead." Ruth stopped, blinked against the sun. It was a man, or a shadow shaped like one. He sat still on a horse, out in the middle of nowhere, like HED been carved into the land. A black hat low over his brow. His animal barely moved, just shifted weight once, slow as a clock. Roth's grip on the rifle tightened. The man didn't come closer, just watch. "Don't say a word," she told June. She set Samuel down gently. Her fingers trembled not from fear, but from memory. Aiming alone in this land was rarely a gift. But then he rode forward, not fast, just steady. As he neared, Ruth saw he was lean, sun minus burnt. Early 30s maybe. His shirt was faded denim. A rifle slung behind his saddle. One of his eyes looked damaged, or maybe just weary. He stopped 10 paces off. "Even in, Mum," he said. She didn't answer. He looked past her to June and Samuel, then back. "You folks out from somewhere?" "We're headed west," Ruth said. He nodded once. "Ain't much west, except more of the same." Silence settled between them. A hawk circled high above, tilting slow. "You got food?" he asked. Ruth raised the rifle a little. "What makes you think you can ask that?" He didn't flinch. "'Cause you got children, and I got a conscience. Plenty of men with consciences buried in shallow ground." That made him smile faint. True enough. She stared at him. He looked tired, same as her. Worn boots, dust to the knees. A rope coiled neat behind his saddle. No badge, no arrogance. Just a man. Finally, she lowered the rifle. "We had some beans last night. That's gone." He nodded again, reached slowly into his saddlebag. and tossed a cloth bundle to the ground. It landed soft, dried meat, hard bread. Not much, but it might help. Ruth looked at it. Why give it? He shrugged. I saw a woman walk in with 2 kids and no horse. Figured it was for fun. June stepped forward, but Ruth put a hand out to stop her. What's your name? She asked. Call me Eli. You alone? He looked to the horizon. For a while now. She waited, measuring him. Finally, she stepped forward, picked up the bundle, unwrapped it. The smell of meat hit her hard. Her stomach groaned. She handed some to June, tore a piece for Samuel, then chewed her own. Eli didn't watch them eat. He just looked up at the sky. You got a place you're headed? She asked. No place in particular. You're welcome to ride on. I might. She glanced at the sun. We'll be moving soon. Eli nodded. Mind if I ride alongside a piece? Safer in numbers. Ruth thought a long time. Then, with no warmth but no ice either, she said, You do anything I don't like, you'll shoot you first and bury you second. Ella's mouth twitched again, just barely. Fair. He turned his horse slowly and started walking it ahead, never once looking back. Ruth picked up Samuel, settled him against her chest, and followed. June fell in beside her, quiet. They walked on, a stranger at their side and the wind at their backs. They traveled together for 4 days. Eli kept to the edge of their path, never pushing too close, never lagging too far. He rode slow to match their pace, even though Ruth could see the tension in his shoulders when the horse shuffled too long in place. A man used to motion, a man choosing stillness. He didn't ask questions. He didn't touch the children. When they stopped to rest, he tied his horse to a tree and sat apart, whittling scraps of wood with a worn pocket knife. On the second night, when Samuel woke crying, Eli reached into his saddlebag without a word and pulled out a small carved horse. The boy took it with both hands, then fell asleep with it tucked against his cheek. Ruth didn't say thank you. By the 5th morning, June started walking closer to him. Not talking much, just close enough to listen when he muttered to the horse or when he spoke low about the weather. Ruth noticed. She also noticed the way June glanced at her, like waiting for permission. They found a creek the next afternoon. Cold water, sweet. Ruth dropped to Hearn, eased beside it, and let it run over her wrists, her face, her raw feet. The sound of it filled her chest like breath she hadn't taken in weeks. Eli took his boots off, rolled up his trousers, and stepped in. Cold, he said, grinning faintly. Better than coffee. Samuel splashed after him, laughing, a sudden burst of sound in the wide, empty land. Ruth looked up, startled by it. June smiled. Ruth almost did too. That night they made a small fire by the bank. Eli shared the last of his dry venison. Ruth boiled the last of her beans. June gathered sticks. Samuel fell asleep with his head in Ruth's lap. You got people? Eli asked, not looking at her. No, she said. Not anymore. He nodded quiet. She looked at him. And you? He poked the fire with a twig. Had a wife. She died 2 winters ago. Fever. I'm sorry. He shrugged. She wasn't happy with me. I was a bad man, just not the man she thought she married. Ruth stared into the flame. That happens. Eli looked up. It does. Silence settled. A better silence. The kind that didn't bite. Later, when the fire burned low and June and Samuel were asleep, Eli sat up straighter. I was a school teacher once, he said. Ruth turned to him, surprised. In Missouri, he went on. Little town near the river. Taught boys to write their names and girls to read out of Psalms. I liked it, but the war made fools of us all. When I came back, the school was gone. So was my wife's laughter. She didn't answer, but something eased in her chest. Ill, I rubbed his hands together. Been drifting ever since. You don't drink? Not anymore. You don't touch women who don't ask? No, Mum. She met his eyes in the dark. Good. The fire cracked. He leaned back against his saddle, folded his arms, and closed his eyes. The stars blinked down like old eyes, and Ruth sat with her back to the trees, Samuel's breath against her side, her hands folded in her lap. The quiet no longer felt like something waiting to kill her. 2 days west of the creek, they came across the remains of a burned minus outstage stop. black timbers jutting from the earth like ribs. Ruth stopped without meaning to, Samuel on her hip. June came up beside her, hand shading her eyes. "Fire was weeks ago," Eli said, swinging down from the saddle. He crouched near the edge of the ruin. "No fresh tracks." "Who'd he do this?" June asked. Eli didn't answer right away. "Could be bandits. Could be someone owed money. Out here, sometimes people just burn." They moved on faster now. Something about the jar made Ruth's stomach coil. That night, they made camp at a dry wash. No fire, no talking. The wind rose. Ruth kept the rifle close. Eli didn't sleep either. The tension never left them after that. It moved with them, quiet, like a dog with mean eyes. The land changed too. Hills bled into low scrubland, scattered pinioned reasoned rock shelves shaped by wind. A place hard to track in, hard to escape from. One afternoon, with the sun halfway down and June walking ahead, Eli stopped suddenly. He held up a hand sharp. Ruth froze. Samuel wind. Eli turned in his saddle, face dark. "Riders. Coming fast." "How many?" "3. Ruth's grip tightened around the rifle. "We hide?" "No time." He looked around fast. "Down that ravine. Get the children behind the brush. Now." June pulled Samuel with her, scrambling down the rocks. Ruth followed, crouching low. Eli stayed above, calm as ever, one hand on his pistol. The riders came like thunder. Dust kicked up high. They weren't lawmen. Their clothes were too rough, their horses too thin. One of them yelled something when he spotted Eli, but the wind dragged it off. Ruth held her breath. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Eli raised his arms slow. "Just passing through," he called out. The first rider pulled up, face sunburned, teeth brown. "That right? No trouble, man." The second rider, younger, pointed. "That's your family?" "Just traveling with them." The men laughed, a short, ugly sound. The third rider had a rifle across his lap. "Well, maybe we take the horse and you keep walking." Ruth raised her rifle from behind the brush, aimed dead at the youngest rider's chest. "No," she said. The air went still. Even the horse flinched. "You touch this man's horse," she said, "and I shoot you clean through." The man turned in his saddle, looking toward the voice. "Who the hell's that?" "Shall do it," Eli said. The youngest rider shifted. "I ain't worth it," he muttered. "Damn straight it A. I-N-T," Ruth snapped. The first rider spat. "Fine. I-I-N-T. No point in bleedin' out for a busted saddle. See 'em on." They turned and drove off without another word. Ruth didn't lower the rifle until the dust faded. Eli climbed down the slope slow. "You always shoot first." "Only when I mean it." He looked at her, a long moment. "You meant it." "I buried one man already this month. I'm not burying you too." June watched them both with wide eyes. Samuel clung to her leg. That night they built a fire after all. Eli passed Ruth a canteen, and for the first time since they met, she accepted it without looking away. "You're not afraid to kill," he said. "I'm afraid of losing what little I have." Eli nodded. "That's the better reason." She sat beside him, closer than before. Not touching, but not apart. They came upon a town the next morning. Not much of one. A mercantile with a torn awning. A stable. A church with boards across the windows. A schoolhouse that looked long since emptied. The sign at the edge of the dirt road read Mineral Gap, the paint half minus flake, the rest some minus bleach beyond hope. June read the name aloud. Ruth said nothing. Eli dismounted slow, scanning the quiet. No dogs barked. No doors creaked. Still, there were signs of life. Smoke drifted from behind the blacksmith's shed, and somewhere down the lane, a curtain shifted. "Well, going slow," Eli said. "People out here don't take kindly to strangers charging in." Ruth adjusted Samuel's weight on her hip. "We're used to that." They walked together toward the store. Ruth noticed how June stayed near Eli now, not clinging, but close. Something in her posture had changed, less guarded, more steady. She wasn't a child anymore, not after the miles they do up. Ruth had seen it coming and feared it all the same. Inside the mercantile, a thin man with wire glasses stood behind a counter cluttered with bolts of cloth and rusted tins. He looked up without surprise, as if HED expected them exactly when they came. "We're low on sugar and bread," he said, "but I got beans, oats, some lard. You got coin?" Eli stepped forward. "I got enough for what they need." The man's eyes narrowed. "They are kin?" Eli glanced at Ruth. "They're mine to care for." The storekeeper held his gaze a moment, then nodded. "Good enough." While Eli haggled over the cost of a sack of oats and a bar of soap, Ruth stepped out onto the porch with Samuel. He was thin. His shirt collar hung loose, ribs showing when the wind caught it just right. She smoothed his hair back with her fingers. "You hungry?" she asked. He nodded but didn't speak. She knew they couldn't keep going like this much longer. She also knew they couldn't stop here. Mineral Gap had the feel of a place near dying, the kind of town that fed on itself when the crops failed and money ran dry. When Eli came out with supplies slung over one shoulder, he nodded toward the hills. "There's a homestead north of here," he said. "Used to belong to a friend of mine. He passed on last year. Far as I know, no one's claimed it." Ruth met his eyes. "You're saying we stay?" "I'm saying you rest," he said. "What comes after, that's yours to decide." They left town without another word. No one followed. No one said goodbye. The homestead sat in a small valley rimmed with pine and draw. The house was rough minus built, but it had a roof and a chimney. A barn leaned low, one door broken clean off. A fence marked out where a garden once grew. It looked forgotten, but not ruined. Ruth stood there a long time staring. Wind blew dust across the porch. A shutter banged once and stilled. She looked to Eli. "You think we could fix it?" He shrugged. "With time. With work. I've done worse." June stepped up beside her. "We could plant something in the spring." Samuel clapped once. "Can we stay?" No one answered him. That night, they lit a fire in the hearth. Ruth sat by it with her boots off, her bare feet near the flames. The pain was worse now that she had a place to rest. Her hands trembled, her shoulders ached, but her breathing came easier. Eli brought in water from the well, then sat across from her. He didn't speak for a long while. "Then you never said your name." "Ruth." He nodded. "That's a strong name." She met his eyes. "I've had to be strong." "I can see that." Outside, the wind slipped around the corners of the house, but the walls held. And for the first time in weeks, no one slept with one eye open. The work started the next morning. Ruth rose before the sun, her muscles stiff, feet wrapped in cloth. June helped gather branches for kindling while Eli patched the barn roof with what he could salvage. Samuel tried to help, dragging boards too heavy for his arms and talking to the hens that wandered in from somewhere up the ridge. By midday, the porch was swept, the hearth cleared of ash, and cots dragged from the loft above the barn. Ruth found herself standing in the center of the little house, staring at it all like it might vanish. June set down a basket of pine cones by the fire. "Ma," she said, softly, "I like it here." Ruth didn't answer. She was sure she trusted it yet. Later that day, a rider came up the valley road. A woman, wrapped in a faded coat, rifle across her saddle. She wore a preacher's face, serious, searching. Ruth stepped outside first, rifle down but ready. Eli joined her without speaking. The rider slowed, raised one hand. "Name's Lorna Price," she said. "I keep the store and post in Mineral Gap. Word is someone moved into the old Walker place." Eli nodded. "That DBS. You planning on staying?" "Maybe." Lorna looked them over. Ruth, June behind her, the boy sitting on the porch steps. "You a married man?" she asked Eli. "No, Mom." She turned her gaze on Ruth. "And you?" "I buried mine 6 days east of here." Lorna's expression didn't change. "We don't see many widows come this way. Not with children." Ruth straightened. "Didn't have much choice." The woman studied her a bit longer. "Well, we need decent folks. You work hard. You'll be welcome." "Do we need to sign something?" Ruth asked. Lorna shook her head. "I ain't no one left to file land claims. You plant roots, it's yours. But don't expect help if you don't give it." "Fair?" "Fair," Ruth said. Lorna nodded. "You'll bring seed come spring if you still got a roof." With that, she turned her horse and rode off, hooves thudding soft into dirt. They watched her go. Eli said nothing. June let out a breath she had been holding. Ruth kept her eyes on the road. That night, while the children slept, Ruth sat on the back step with her hands wrapped around a cup of hot water. Eli joined her. They watched the moon rise above the pine ridge, the sky cold and clear. "Shess right, you know," he said. "About what?" "You're not like most women. Not ones who've lost as much as you have." Ruth didn't look at him. "I don't think about what I've lost anymore. Just what's left." He nodded slow. "And what is left?" She thought about it. The quiet breathing of her children inside. The rough smell of firewood. The ache in her hands from working. The man sitting beside her who hadn't one stride to own her grief. "Hope," she said finally. Eli leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "That's enough to start with." They sat like that a long time. Close, but not touching. Two people shaped by silence. And for the first time in her memory, Ruth didn't feel the weight of being watched, judged, or won. Only seen. Winter crept in slow, each morning colder than the last. Frost glazed the window panes like lace, and Ruth learned the rhythm of tending a fire before dawn, of boiling oats and drying boots by the hearth. The children began to laugh again. June read from a Bible left behind in the house, not for salvation but for words. Samuel learned to feed the hens, even named them. One got sick and died, and he cried under the porch until Ruth found him, sat beside him, and said nothing at all. That was enough. Eli stayed. He built a fence for the garden -to-B. He hunted rabbit and shared what little he found. He showed June how to sharpen a knife without dulling the edge. He fixed the leak above Ruth's Scott without her asking. They moved around each other like hands made to work together, slow, sure, with no wasted motion. But peace, Ruth knew, was not a thing that stayed put. It arrived that night in the form of a knock on the door. Ruth froze. Eli reached for the rifle. June pulled Samuel close. The knock came again, 3 firm reps. Ruth opened the door to a man she hadn't seen in over 2 years. His name was Boyd Morgan. Once he had shared fence lines and whiskey with her late husband. He was broader now, slower, but still sharp minus eye. He smiled when he saw her. "Well, LB," he said. "Didn't think I'd find you out here." Ruth didn't move. "I heard from someone in Gap," Boyd went on, "that a widow and some kids took up the old Walker place. Figured it had to be you." Eli stepped beside her, silent. Boyd looked him over. "This your new man?" "No," Ruth said flatly. "Why are you here?" Boyd's smile curled. "Just came to talk. See how you're managing. I heard what happened to John. Sad business." Ruth didn't answer. Her grip on the door tightened. "I always thought," Boyd went on, "you and me might be made a better pair." He leaned on the frame. "Course, now that you're free." Eli took one step forward. "You should leave." Boyd's smile broke. "Who the hell are you?" "The man she trusts." Boyd's face darkened. "Not so?" Ruth stepped between them. "Yes, right. You should leave." "Now don't be hasty, Ruth. I got work land money. Your boy could use a proper man around. That other one lost much." Ruth didn't blink. "You're worse." His jaw twitched. "Don't make me say it again," Eli said. Boyd stared at him, then at Ruth. "You'll regret this." "No," Ruth said. "I've done enough regretting." He left. Eli closed the door behind him and leaned against it like something had come loose inside. Ruth stood still, trembling now that the danger had passed. She hated that part mostly after the letting down. June came over and slipped her arms around her mother's waist. Ruth wrapped her in tight. They stood like that a long time, the fire cracking behind them. Eli stirred the coals, quiet. Then, looking into the flame, he said, "If he comes back, he'll be ready." Ruth met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to fight my battles," she said. He nodded. "I know, but I've got a stake in this now." Her throat tightened. She stepped forward, slowly, took his hand, warm, steady, and didn't let go. The next few days passed with a hush over the house, like the wind itself was holding its breath. Ruth watched the road from the window every morning. June did too, though she pretended not to. Samuel sensed something had changed, though he cowed at naming. He clung tighter when the sun went down and stared longer into the fire. Eli worked the same as ever, but Ruth could tell he slept light. His hand always rested near the rifle when night fell. The fear was loud. It didn't shout. It settled into the bones, low and steady. Then, one morning near the end of December, hoofbeats came again. Not fast. One rider. No dust cloud. Just the slow, steady rhythm of someone not in a hurry to surprise anyone. Ruth stepped onto the porch before Eli could stop her. It was Boyd again. But this time, he was smiling. Behind him rode two others, men Ruth didn't know, both carrying rifles strapped across their backs, faces blank and closed. "You've had time to think," Boyd said. "I've done thinking," Ruth said. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Eli stepped out beside her, rifle already in his hands. "Back off." One of the other riders shifted in his saddle. "You're not wanted here," Eli said, voice even. "You come closer, you'll leave blood behind." Boyd spat. "I got legal claim on that land. John Parker borrowed money from me. Never paid it back." Ruth felt something twist deep in her chest. "You're lying." "I've got paper," Boyd said. "Signed and marked. He owed me. That debt's yours now." Eli looked to Ruth. "Is it true?" She shook her head. "John never said." Boyd grinned, teeth yellow. "Of course he didn't. Man dies. Secrets come loose." June appeared behind them, face pale. "What does he want?" "He wants us gone," Ruth said. "No," Boyd said. "I want what's mine. You can pay in kind, or you can leave." Ruth stepped forward. "This house isn't his. Not by law. Not by any right." Boyd's hand dropped near his hip. Now his rifle went up. And, for a moment, the world stood still. Then Ruth raised her voice. "You shoot him, and I shoot you. You shoot me, and he shoots you. We all die. That it?" Boyd's hand froze. The men behind him didn't move. "You don't tell me," Ruth said. "Not like John. Not like the land. Not ever." Her voice didn't shake. Eli stepped beside her again, rifle steady. "You bring this to law," Ruth said. "Then we'll meet it there. But you bring it to my porch, he'll bury you on the other side of it." Boyd stared long and hard. Then he spat again, turned his horse, and rode off without another word. The other to follow. Eli lowered his rifle slowly. Ruth didn't move, not until the dust settled. Inside, Samuel had crawled under the table, hands over his ears. Ruth pulled him out and held him close. June began to cry, the first tears in weeks. Ruth kissed the top of her daughter's head. "We're still standing," she whispered. "That's what matters." That night the wind came hard, but inside the fire held steady. Eli sat close to Ruth, and this time when she leaned against him she didn't pull away. Spring came soft and shy that year. The snow retreated slow from the hills, and where it left, green things followed tufts of wild onion, tiny flowers that bloomed without asking, shoots of grass that swayed even when the wind did not. The valley changed. So did Ruth. The fence Eli built now held shape. The garden rose, cleared and waiting, smelled of fresh minus-turned earth. Chickens scratched where they pleased. June hung laundry on a line she strung herself. Samuel ran barefoot, laughing, chasing moths and falling into the dirt with joy. He no longer had to hide. The house had settled into itself. So had Ruth. She moved through the rooms like someone who belonged, not watching, not waiting for loss, but living inside something real. Eli brought seeds one day, wrapped in an oilcloth, traded from Lorna Price in town. "Peas," he said, handing them to Ruth. She said, "They're hearty, like you." Ruth smiled. "Not big, but true." They planted them together on their knees in the dirt. His hands beside hers, never forcing, never leading, just there. Afterward they sat on the porch, boots off, the evening sun gold against the fields. "I got a letter back from the circuit judge," Eli said. Ruth looked over. "Boyd filed a claim," he continued, "but the debt's no good. No witness, no seal. Judge tossed it." Ruth exhaled. Not relief exactly, just something long minus held finally let go. "I was going to leave," she said. "I know." He looked at her then, long and quiet. "Ruth," he said. She turned to him. "You'd like to stay, not just on this land, but with you, with them." He nodded toward the children. "If you'll have me." She didn't speak right away. She reached for his hand instead, took it, held it, and nodded. That was enough. The days after that unfolded gentle. Eli moved his things from the barn to the back room. Ruth let him. June watched it all with a knowing smirk. Samuel asked if they were married now. Ruth said not yet, and Eli said soon enough. They built a bench for the porch together. They added a second table for the children's schooling. They carved initials into the doorframe, not names, just marks, side by side. Come summer, Lorna brought word that more settlers were moving in. A church might open again. A schoolhouse too. Ruth said she might teach reading, numbers, a bit of Latin. She had been raised to believe words mattered. That belief had survived. One night Ruth stood alone in the garden. The sky burned low with stars. The wind touched her hair and moved on. Behind her the house glowed soft, the sound of dishes and a boy's laughter carrying through the open windows. She closed her eyes. She thought of the road, of John, of the sickness, of the silence that nearly swallowed her whole. Then she thought of Ella's hands, of June's strength, of Samuel's barefoot joy. She opened her eyes and walked inside. The screen door creaked behind her. The fire popped in the hearth. And there, beneath that roof, she found not just shelter, but home. If the land felt honest, subscribe for more truth.